What does it mean for a photograph to be cinematic? When we talk about movies, there are themes and techniques that are present in nearly every single film. Things that make a movie a powerful, immersive story, rather than just any video. And most of us watch without ever really noticing. And it's not just about editing or expensive gear. Some of the most cinematic films ever made are made on cameras that people wouldn't even think about using today. Maybe the exact definition of cinematic means that a photo can't technically be cinematic. But we all know what we mean when we hear the word. Cinematic, in photography terms, means that it feels like a still from a movie. And I'm going to tell you exactly how they make movies cinematic and how you can transfer that over to your photography. And the first and one of the most important things is buying a $10,000 camera. Now, I'm just kidding. It's light. And when it comes to making something cinematic, it's the type of light that matters. A key fundamental to cinematography is the use of soft light. And that can come in a ton of different ways. Because we're not usually on a super expensive film set where we can control all the light, we have to work with what nature provides, the beautiful rays of the sun. And the most common way of getting soft light in everyday circumstances is something that we hear about all the time: shooting at blue hour and golden hour, which is basically just before, during, or just after sunrise and sunset. At this time of the day, the light is super soft and diffused, and therefore much more cinematic. Also, you tend to get crazy tones, which helps add to the overall look and feel of the shot. But that's not the only way to get soft light when you're out shooting. We don't all live in a perfect world where we can wake up at 5 a.m. and take our camera out. So here are the other ways. You can find soft light in the shadows on a sunny day, or by having your subject backlit, or by using a diffuser to make harsh light soft. Another thing I love to do is shoot on misty or foggy days. Then the light is what we call voluminous, almost like the light holds a dimension. This is why so many film crews pump in fake fog into scenes, because it's so atmospheric and it adds to the depth of the shot. And while we're talking about depth, that's the next secret to making cinematic movies and photographs. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you want to get even more in depth about taking killer portraits in natural light, then this course by Desdemona Dallas is going to be absolutely perfect for you. This is exactly the kind of course that I love, because it gives you real, in-depth, step-by-step information of how to shoot out in the field, and you can actually go out and put it into practice and easily understand it. But whether you want to learn about photography, filmmaking, or I don't know, you want to make herb cheese balls, whatever they are, Skillshare is the biggest online learning community for creatives. So if you want to give something new a go, or you want to really hone in on your photography, then scan the QR code or click the link in the description, and the first 500 people that sign up will get a free month of Skillshare. So get started today, and thanks Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Anyway, let's get back to it. When people think about depth, they usually think about depth of field. But in cinematography, using shallow depth of field is a tool to highlight the importance of whatever the subject is doing or saying at the time. It's not usually the singular means to create depth. That job, once again, is down to light. If you can create depth while shooting at f/16, then you know you've done a good job. But how's that done? Well, we already know that it's super handy to be using soft light in cinematography and photography, but it's also super important to understand how to use that light on your subject. Of course, usually in a movie, your subject is a person. So for the sake of demonstrating this, we're gonna use people. It just makes more sense. It just makes it easy. Generally in movies, we see Rembrandt lighting, or basically a light that's up at a 45-degree angle to the subject's face. This creates depth by using layers of light. So if you look at me here, I've got one key light which is just there in the side. Obviously you can't see it, but that light is coming onto my face here, and then we have shadow on this side of my face here, and then there's shadow in the background, and then another light over there. In this instance, we're creating 4 clear layers of light. Light, shadow, shadow, light. And this is fundamental to what makes a movie cinematic and what makes a photograph compelling. So if the objective is to create depth using layers of light, how do we do that in photography when we're not in control of the light that we have? Once again, at blue hour and golden hour, the light is obviously really soft, as we talked about before, but it's also coming in at this kind of angle because the sun is so low in the sky, it's coming across like this. This means you can easily then have the sort of half shadow and half light on a person's face, or even on a building, even on a vehicle, on an animal. Alternatively, if it's much brighter in the day, you can use a diffuser and just make sure that you position your subject at the right angle to create, shadow light. Alternatively, you could backlight them by making them face the opposite way to the sun, and then they'll have a rim light around the back of their head, and their face will then be evenly lit. But it creates layers of light by having a shadowy face and the rim light behind them. Again, if it's super harsh light, then you could look for the shadows and try and bounce some light so that you can then get that directional light and create those layers of light. If you are in the shadows, then it's likely that at some point behind your subject, there will be bright light, and therefore you might have shadow, light, but then you've got light in the background as well. So you're creating those layers of light. Once you start seeing light like this, then you'll really get to understand how to use it to create super cinematic shots. I know a lot of people seem to think of cinematic photography as something that only happens at night with those super teal and orange tones. And you can use all these same techniques at nighttime. It'll just be that you're using an unnatural light source rather than the natural light source of the sun. But next up, I'm going to talk about my favorite part of cinematic photography. And without it, your photos will still just look like boring snapshots. And I'm going to talk about something that is present in every single movie ever: a subject. The subject is what drives the story of a movie or a photograph. They usually create intrigue or mystery, and usually, even if the photo or scene includes multiple people, it's clear who is important in that shot. I'd say one of the key things with subjects is to make sure they aren't looking directly at the camera. In movies, this is rarely the case. Anywhere but directly at the lens. This gives us more intrigue that something is happening outside of the frame. Whatever your subject is, a person, an animal, whatever, it doesn't even necessarily need to be in the frame. It could be the remnants of your subject. Sometimes it could be a vehicle, a drink with some lipstick around the rim, an imprint on a bed, a half-eaten piece of toast, or a single light on in a building. These things all tell a story about a subject without actually showing the subject. But for sure, you need a subject or a suggestion of a subject for a shot to feel cinematic. If it's too chaotic and there's a ton of people, or there's no subject, then there's no mystery, there's no intrigue, and there's no story. If it's just a landscape photo and there's no clear subject, not even a building or a vehicle that looks inhabited, then it's unlikely to feel cinematic. If it helps, think of it in terms of a main character. Who's your main character? What are they doing? And yeah, this can still work with a few subjects, but there needs to be a clear relationship, either positively or negatively, between them. As you can see here, these two are clearly together. The shot isn't soft, but it's compositionally strong, and in this case, the layers are created by sections of color. Of course, ideally, we'd be able to include every technique that we've learned so far. Soft light, layers of light, and a strong subject. But in photography, that's not always going to be possible because we aren't in control of our environment. So you've got to do what you can do. I've got a couple of more really important techniques of cinematic photography. But before we get to that, I've got a free download that you can go ahead, click the link in the description, just go to that. You get a free download of basically everything we talked about in this video. It just means you can refer back to it, makes your life easier. Just go ahead, take a look. But anyway, whenever I see videos about cinematic photography, it always feels like the emphasis is on editing. Obviously, people have their own ways of coloring movies, and that adds to the whole vibe of the movie. But it would still be cinematic with or without the editing. But I know some of you are going to want to know, how'd you get that feel in photography? Well, first up, and this isn't something that I do, and it's not something that I necessarily think you need to do either, but you could make your aspect ratio wider. Most movies are shot at a really wide aspect ratio, and most photographs might not be that wide. So you could cut things down to 16:9 or even wider if you really wanted to. It's not something that I would do, but I've got to mention it. But when it comes to editing the color of your photographs, it's going to be a bit different for every shot. And while I usually edit film photos, I'll show you on a couple of digital shots because I know that's what most people shoot with. And if I do it on film shots, I'm going to get people being like, oh, you should have done it on digital. So with this shot, the key things I want to do here is to reduce the highlights. Maybe make it a little bit warmer, increase the saturation of the oranges for our skin tones, and maybe decrease the saturation of some of the greens. But those are the simple changes, and everyone will have slightly different things that they prefer to do. But this is basically the main thing. Head to the color grading wheel, and you can increase your teals in the shadows and your oranges in the highlights. The amount you need will be different depending on what the shot is, what the kind of light is. So you've just got to play around with that and get used to it. It's not an exact science in a sense. But these changes to highlights and shadows are kind of the big thing that makes it feel more cinematic. It's what most people would do when editing for a cinematic feel. You could do that in your curves. You might want to add this kind of feel in your curves, but I'm doing it in the color grading wheel. But there you go. That's pretty much everything I would do if I was specifically trying to shoot in a cinematic way. But I do want to say, I don't even specifically go out of my way to shoot cinematically. My main aim usually is for dreamlike photos. And to be fair, just because a photo follows cinematic techniques doesn't necessarily make it a good photo. And a photo that doesn't follow these techniques isn't necessarily a bad one either. But all these tools that you've learned in this video are super, super valuable, and you'll be able to tie them in with your own style of photography, and you'll hopefully always remember them. So I hope you found this video really useful. As I said before, go and take a look at Skillshare. You can get a free month. That's amazing. And also go and take a look at my free downloads. It's in the link in the description. And as always, take care. I hope you have a great week. I hope you take the best photo you've taken in the last 3 months. I think that's a realistic thing to try and do. And of course, drop me a subscribe. It's the coolest free thing that you can do to support this channel. And it means that I can continue to make the best work that I can possibly make for you guys. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.